Hey, listeners, just as a quick heads up for this one, this recording was done over the course of a couple of days due to some inclement weather. So if there's some difference in audio quality, that's why. All right. And that's it. Enjoy the show. One's a trippy benchmark in sci fi history, the other is its more grounded labor of love sequel, Blade Runner. They remade it. Hello, and welcome back to They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
I'm the other one, Jacob.
And this week we'll be going into Blade Runner and its, aforementioned sequel, Blade Runner 2049. But first, I've been Jake. What you been up to, as per usual?
I've been doing all right. I'm getting older. I'm aching.
I mean, we're always getting older.
Oh, please. Spare me.
Spare me your rhetoric.
Spare me.
Spare me your daily bull.
We're talking about what we've been watching.
Yeah.
Because that's all anyone gives a damn about.
I mean, that's what they're here for.
Not
here,
a whole...
You here to listen about my my cancer scare? No, you're here to listen about what I watch for movies.
Yeah.
And how I studied another one.
Yeah.
By the way, it was positive. I do have cancer. I'm very sorry. Anyway,
that's okay.
I don't. By the
I'll
way,
get a new host soon.
Yeah, that's fair.
New co-host. But no, I've been watching a lot of miscellaneous stuff, a lot of making ofs for like random television shows and cartoons online.
Good old How It's Made.
Yeah, I watched a movie called Rabbit Run, which was a direct-to-DVD movie based on the Looney Tunes show from 2011.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
It was great.
That just sounds like a benchmark in history.
I don't know why I watched it. It's one of those things that comes up in your bar and you're just like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes.
Without cable and HBO these days, I don't really watch things randomly anymore. Which kind of sucks.
Well, just do it.
Well, yeah. But it's like, it's either that or like Netflix. And for Netflix, I have the very easy option of being like, I don't like this. Bye.
You got to be more open to terrible experiences.
Well, yeah, but again, that's why I like cable and everything.
Mm-hmm. The only big thing I partook in is I saw Ready Player One. Mm-hmm. It was actually a lovely experience because I was in the theater the day it premiered and there were two other people there.
Wow.
Two heavy set gentlemen. One of them was constantly. I think he was laughing behind me, which it's not like it was a comedy. He was just like, I couldn't tell if he was coughing or clearing his throat.
That was me. That was me, you dick. No, it wasn't me.
I was kind of excited. I was like, oh, this is great. I can just do whatever I want while I'm here and watch it. That's only happened a handful of other times.
Yeah.
Like I was in theaters for Apollo 18 when it came out, and
nice.
One of like 3 people in the audience.
Yeah. Weirdly, when I first saw The Force Awakens, when it first came out, like the midnight premiere, in the theater I was in, like the whole movie theater was constantly bustling with people, huge lines going each one. The one time me and whoever I was with, I can't remember who, when we went to the theater, there were maybe 10 other people with us. Just, we were near the kind of the end of the big rush, and there was just nobody in there. Literally, when the credits were starting to come up, it's like,
this is it.
Is there anyone else in here? Like,
I guess this is it.
We were all just kind of buddy about it.
But I guess for closure on that, I actually kind of, I hesitate to say liked because there's a lot I find wrong with it, but I didn't hate the movie. It changed a lot of really bad parts or aspects of the book, and I think it did better for it. If I'm being honest, like
that's fair. I mean, cards on the table. I still haven't seen it because I just either haven't had time or I just haven't had the inclination. But if there's one thing I give Spielberg at this point, it's taking what was once a book property into a movie property and making it better. One of the few times in history, one of the few people in history who can actually do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many people know that Jaws and Jurassic Park were originally based off books? Simply because the movies were so good.
Right. I think a lot of people know Jurassic Park's based on a book now.
Yeah, that's probably coming up more and more. I've barely met anyone who's known Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, have not watched that yet. I probably watched less than you. I've mostly been reading, honestly, which also ties into a thing I've been watching. Show on Netflix called Altered Carbon, and its original book. Really cool, classic kind of Netflix formula. Overly violent, overly sexual, that sort of thing, but still pretty cool. Cool, super futuristic noir aesthetic, which is going to be a theme today, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, that's pretty much been it. I have not seen a single movie other than the ones we've watched.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been pretty. Excuse me, it's been pretty slow.
Oh, let's go to the theater sometime. See A Quiet Place. I heard it's good.
Oh yeah,
let's go see that.
Good old John Krasinski.
Mm-hmm.
It's the closest thing we'll get to a silent film these days.
John Krasinski. I thought it was John Crickfalusi. I thought I was gonna go see a horror movie starring John Kay.
You continue to astound me, Jacob. I have absolutely no idea who that is, and I don't care to look up.
Very good.
But for now, on to the usual thing: films. Specifically Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049.
Movies.
Those things.
That's what the show's about, right?
Yeah, and remakes specifically. In this case, we'll be going into the second category that we brought up in the pilot episode, the long overdue sequel. This one's I think this one hit right at the 15-year mark, didn't it?
Well, 82 to 2017, 25 years.
What the fuck is wrong with me? Where in my head did I have 15 years there?
I don't know. Basic math?
Yeah. This is
basic math.
This is why I've failed math so many times, people. Don't think less of me for it. But yes. You ever had a big thing with these films? Because Blade Runner in and of itself has always kind of had a not controversial stance in the sci-fi world, but a kind of divisive stance.
No. Well, especially not with 2049, because it just came out.
No, of course not.
I remember watching Blade Runner a long time ago with my dad for the first time, and I fell asleep during it. That was my experience with a lot of sci-fi and action movies. I remember being at the premiere of Episode 3 of Star Wars, and I fell asleep during it too. So I just wasn't into that,
Yeah, I guess I've always been into super high octane stuff. So I remember seeing Episode 3 as well. But man, I was up the whole time for that. I was like, Star Wars.
Well, this is along the same line with tech and stuff, but it's a lot slower paced because it's a noir. It's a detective story. It's not a Star War.
Yeah, I think I saw the first one 5 years ago, maybe even less. No, right around 5. And I just didn't know what to think of it because I knew the reputation of it, and I just finally found it just floating around on HBO, and I saw it, and I just kind of sat down and I was like, why did any of that happen? Do I have a good opinion of this? I don't know.
Why did any of that happen?
Why did any of that happen? The Blade Runner story.
You gotta think like a film student.
Well, I didn't.
You gotta think everything happens for a reason. Stories that are just a vehicle for comedy or a vehicle for one scene after the other. They hold no clout. There's no importance for them.
I just thought it was confusing. I thought a lot of stuff was random and it was hard to follow.
But if we're being honest, the Blade Runner is a very stock sort of film school film.
Yeah, it's very.
It's a picture that you'll either be assigned to view or they'll talk about in terms of cinematography,
and just
or it's on the teacher's list of top 20 films you should watch, along with Citizen Kane in 2001.
And if only just because of the strange history it's had. It's famously had 7 different cuts, with its original being 3 being all kinds of wrong from how Ridley Scott intended it to be. Then the 2007 cut, which was widely considered to be the definitive cut, which is the one we'll be focusing on because we wanted to cut down any extra chaff,
right?
Fat. We wanted to cut down the fat, and then so we could just kind of really do it as Scott intended it.
Right, he was happy with all those. Like the fact his original cut was 4 hours long.
Oh my god!
And they watched it and it was incomprehensible. So they had, despite Ford saying otherwise, they had him record a narrative over it like an old school noir.
Yep. To
try and make sense of it, and it was just a miserable
experience for everybody involved.
Apparently so, yeah.
But
I'd like to have that reel.
Yeah, that'd be. Let's spend an afternoon with that one.
I'll watch it.
For the sake of clarity, I'm going to give a quick rundown of both films, especially the first one, since it can be, even just watching it, even then, it's hard to get a good synopsis of. So I'm going to do the best I can. Basically, the entirety of Blade Runner is, the benchmark of dark sci-fi. It's set in, at the time, 2019 Los Angeles, in the hyper dystopian, grungy future, and it's set around the character Rick Deckard, a Blade Runner, also known, which is a type of cop that hunts down replicant humans, or just replicants.
He's played by Harrison Ford.
Yes, it is.
You know his work.
Yeah, if you don't, well, I mean, that's fair. You might be young. You might not have seen a lot of stuff. Go see his other work. Harrison Ford. There's a good glowing recommendation for you, Mr. Ford. Please love me.
Whatever work that might be.
Yeah. Harrison Ford, known for such things as...
Air Force One.
Star Wars.
Storage Wars. He was on two episodes of Storage Wars.
Storage Wars. But yes, it's centered around Harrison Ford's character, Rick Deckard, a formerly retired Blade Runner who is brought back in to hunt down 4 rogue replicant robot guys, and just the insanity that ensues from that. Just the kind of slice of life, it does have the very noir style of kind of slice of life situation, where it's very much showing the story of a city as it's much showing a story of this specific character. Or I guess I should say a society. They don't really touch on the city that much.
No, it can have it. It has its own characteristics.
Yeah. But the story unfolds as Deckard is hunting down these 4 characters. Leon, Pris, there's another, the other female replicant, and...
Zora,
thank you.
Zahora.
And Roy, famously played by Rutger Hauer. And throughout it, he is also, brought privy to the information that a more advanced replicant exists in the form of the woman Rachel, played by Sean Young.
Yes, that's correct.
Sean Young. I got that one right this time.
Good job.
Hooray! But he's brought privy to the information that the Tyrell Corporation has, the corporation that has made all these robots, has created Rachel, a robot with actual human memories to better simulate emotion. Which is actually a really cool plot device. I keep thinking about it. It's like, yeah, that's actually really cool. It's like, how do you formulate, human emotions? Through their memories. It's like, that's the only way you could.
Right. I always love that subject of recreation of memories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stock-wise, just because there's no... They're always going to end up being secondhand unless they're done specifically by the person who remembers them. There's no way of telling how something played out in the mind of someone that experienced it.
Exactly.
Even if you were there.
So that's, that kind of touches on one of the bigger themes, which we'll go into later, of the idea of humanity and, what is someone but the sum of their memories. Good old Castlevania reference there. Mm-hmm. But yes, he being Deckard learns about Rachel, but continues his hunt down for all of these different replicants along the way, kind of realizing, maybe they have, legitimate reasons for trying to live and, killing and murdering their way to do it. And along the way, he learns that these replicants are in one way or another attempting to extend their lifespans, as they themselves have been designed to only live for 4 years. So they're just tearing up this city trying to find a way to do it, killing that one guy that made the eyes, that one Asian actor whose name escapes me now.
James Hong.
It is. Yes. I love him. I just do eyes. And throughout this, it's, constantly hinted at, what's the greater story that's going on? How are these guys really, how are these guys able to do all this crap? And what are they actually trying to achieve? Do they just want to live longer, or are they trying to be humans? That's a really big thing, and it is the whole idea of, more human than human, as Mr. Tyrell puts it, as the Tyrell Corporation's slogan. These replicants themselves trying to be human more and more. And so it comes to, this climactic end with Deckard and Roy fighting it out. Okay, fighting it out. It's Rutger Hauer going crazy and chasing Harrison Ford through a derelict building, and ending with the now famous Tears and Rain speech. And then it just kind of ends. It kind of just drops off, like, Deckard and Rachel kind of have a thing. It's heavily hinted at that Deckard could be a replicant, but it's never made explicitly sure.
Edward James Olmos is like...
Edward James Olmos...
Come here.
Playing the character of Gaff, this...
Come here.
This, like, I guess police handler. He's never really established who he is. He's just kind of the guy who comes to collect him for this case.
Yeah, he supposedly works with him. It's not like a buddy cop team or like a master and protege, but they work together under the same firm, so they have some relation. Yeah,
but that's pretty much the extent of it. And it kind of like drops the hint. It's like, there's some various vague hints that he drops along the way that how Deckard might be a replicant, but it's never really explicitly made. Like, Ridley Scott himself has said that Deckard's meant to be a replicant in the film, but again, it's meant to be up for interpretation.
Right. Didn't you say Philip K. Dick?
Philip K. Dick. Something about that? I can't remember finding an exact quote, but I do remember hearing from several sources that Philip K. Dick did want Deckard to be a replicant.
Okay. Because in the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? In the book, the only real mention of that is Deckard talking with another police officer from a different agency, or another Blade Runner from a different agency, I should say, about how androids don't care about one another, how they're willing to push them aside to get their own gains. And he's like, well, by that logic, then you could also be an android. So Deckard freaks out and has the test that they use,
the Voight-Kampff test,
that they use to prove whether someone is an android or not. He uses it on himself and is basically like, okay, I'm not one. And he has no real reason to skew the results. He seems generally concerned. So I'm not sure where we're supposed to be getting from, at least from the book. I don't understand where we're supposed to be getting this.
I may be misquoting, and I might be attributing that quote that was originally Ridley Scott's to Philip K. Dick, but I can't be for certain at the moment.
Right.
All that I know is, like, it might be the thing where how Rachel was given the Voight-Kampff test and she took, and it was way harder to tell she was a replicant. Maybe Deckard is also is straight up impossible to detect for whatever reason. But that just opens up so many different questions of the situation of how did he get to this position? How did he get lured to meet Rachel and that sort of thing? But that gets brought up in the next movie, which I will probably go into. But basically, movie ends. Rutger Hauer dies of, his lifespan runs out, which still is confusing because technically he was born in 2016, but he died in 2019, so his 4 years weren't up. That's one of the several plot holes in that movie, but again, that's not what we're here for.
Maybe he was really tired.
Maybe he was just sleeping there in the rain.
He was the Daffy Duck to Harrison Ford's Porky Pig in that entire scene, busting his head through walls and chasing him around the building.
Yeah.
He just wore himself out.
It's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be here in the rain with a nail in my hand and a dove in the other.
And then he short-circuited.
Yeah. it's all just water. But, yeah, pretty much ends there. Harrison Ford goes back, collects Rachel, and they run off together, and the ending is left to be, open-ended. We don't really know what happens to them after that. Until Blade Runner 2049, which occurs 30 years later in the, cinematic universe. Now centered around a completely different Blade Runner who is explicitly stated to be a replicant. This being Ryan Gosling's character, K, or Joe.
We'll just call him K.
Yeah,
Let's not call him Joe.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. But, yes, anyway, on that note, K, the main character of the new one, a, immediately established replicant Blade Runner who, in his first scene, is going off to hunt down this one other Blade Runner played by
Batista.
Good old Batista.
WWE.
Yeah, I'm really glad he's gone on to do good stuff. He's a really good actor.
He's in
Guardians.
Well, yeah, he's in Guardians. I was trying to think of the last Bond film.
Oh yeah, the Spectre.
Spectre, yeah, he was in Spectre.
Apparently, he played Oddjob.
When?
No, that was the character.
Oh, was it?
That was supposed to be Oddjob.
Oh,
I know.
I didn't read that.
It blew my mind.
You know, I've seen Spectre.
Yeah.
I don't remember Oddjob being in it.
I mean,
to be frank, I don't remember Batista being in it either. But
yeah, apparently that's who he was playing.
Okay.
He didn't wear the hat. He just wore it at the beginning.
Oh well, then no wonder.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to tell it's Oddjob without the hat?
I mean, same. What are we talking about?
We're talking about
that'd be a good point.
Blade Runner 2049.
That'd be a good point to put like a little beep. Like, what are we talking about? But yes, he goes off to hunt the replicant played by Batista, and from there just kind of spirals into this whole plot where they find a skeleton buried underneath a tree just outside of Batista's house, and they find it to be a woman that had died in childbirth, but the woman turns out to be a replicant. So they're like, what the hell?
She's got a serial number in her.
She got a serial number.
Dem bones. And
it establishes this new plot point of, replicants are able to have children now, which in, their further, in their, this point in their society, they're like, okay, that can't happen. It's already a whole big us versus them debate, which, it establishes early in the film that replicants were outlawed for a while, but then they were brought back for the sake of, helping to settle more and more colonizable worlds.
The Princess Bride herself, Robin Wright, makes a point to tell Kay, we can't let this happen.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was her.
Yeah, she's like, this can't be allowed.
Yeah. Yes. So he being Ryan Gosling is tasked with the mission to find the kid that this woman had and just kill him, just to straight up not allow this kind of replicant to exist in order to prevent the idea of a self-replicating what is essentially a slave force to the society. They want to be able to fully control it in every way because they're bitches.
Yeah.
Because they're complete assholes. And then to further thicken the plot, it's actually revealed that the body they found was Rachel's from the previous movie, the highly advanced replicant, which they've now established, she could even give birth. And then, highly implying, at least from that point forward, since, if you've already seen the first movie, that Deckard was the father of this kid. And so that sends him, it sends Kay off on this, sprawling journey to try and find this child, on the way being sent to the new Tyrell Corporation, the Wallace Corporation, I believe it's called, with the, his name was strange. It was like Neander Wallace.
Neander Wallace, yeah.
Neander Wallace, played by Jared Leto.
Jared Leto with blinding contacts in his eyes.
Yep, actually wearing...
Stumbling around.
Yep, actually wearing completely opaque contacts in order to simulate being blind for this character, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like, I've kind of always been hesitant with Jared Leto, mostly because of the whole, fiasco with Suicide Squad and how much of a bastard he was during that filming. But then this one, I was like, okay, yeah, he's pretty cool.
He's just a method actor. It's an unfortunate role. If to play devil's advocate, it's an unfortunate role for a method actor.
Yeah, but then
because it's an insane person.
Exactly.
Did he have to torment his castmates? No, but
I mean,
it's just a bad circumstance.
Yeah, but yes, he, Wallace kind of. And Wallace is the new Tyrell of this world, and he's actually also trying to find this self-replicating replicant child in order to be able to make more replicants the easy way, basically, as he puts it. And decides, I could just send my hitwoman, played by who exactly?
Sylvia Hoeks.
Sylvia.
I don't know if that's Hook or Hoeks, but
let's go with Hoeks for now.
So into Ren and Stimpy that it's just Hoek to me whenever I see it.
But yes, a replicant hitwoman named Love, played by who you just said, and she actually uses Kay and kind of allows him to go on with his investigation so they can find this kid. Along the way, they kind of learn a bit of backstory about Kay. He has this memory that's been implanted in him of, once I was a kid, I had this little wooden horse that was really significant to me, and I hid it from these kids who were trying to take it from me. And it's revealed later on, oh, that memory actually happened. It wasn't just constructed. And it's what points him to the fact that, oh, I'm the kid. What?
I am the boy.
Yes. They figure out that, he figures out that he had the same birth date as the boy that was born from Rachel. And so he, returning to the police station, is tested by the new Voight-Kampff test, which is called a baseline test.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool scene, by the way. But it's immediately shown, oh, he's got some shit going on in his head. Let's bring him in. And then his handler's like, what the hell's going on? It's like, no, it's cool. I found the kid and I put him down. That's why I'm acting all weird. And then his handler's none too subtle, like, sure. Well, I'm going to give you 48 hours to get back on track. I mean, escape! And, get on with that. And so he does. He escapes from, just immediate sight of anyone who could track him. He takes himself and his holographic girlfriend. By the way, he has a holographic girlfriend. That's just
Joy.
Joy. Joi. Pretty cool. Really cool shooting techniques with that. But he goes off with her and has this little wooden horse that he has analyzed, and it points him in the direction of where it came from, this being highly irradiated Las Vegas. And not really, I guess it was irradiated. They don't really establish explicitly what happened. They just say like a dirty bomb detonated there, so it just filled the place with a ton of, chemicals and radiation. And he goes there, and he ends up finding Deckard from the first film, also still played by Harrison Ford, now 25 years older. And kind of just starts kind of really ingratiating himself, thinking that Deckard is his own father, and having some really cool scenes with like holographic Elvis and holographic Frank Sinatra, because it's the future and it's Vegas and it's awesome. Which, that's kind of a random point, I know, but, I remember that so explicitly from that scene. But he finds him and is immediately tracked down by Love, the Wallace hit woman. He is nearly killed, his holographic girlfriend is killed, and Deckard is taken hostage. Or not hostage, he's just taken prisoner and returned back to Wallace. At this point, Kay gets saved by this like resistance group of replicants, kind of like out of nowhere. Like, it sort of establishes earlier, like there's a sex scene with, or at least an implied sex scene with this one prostitute woman who puts a tracker on him, like at the
in his
coat.
Yeah.
And then they actually track him down because they know what he's been doing. Like, they know he's been trying to find this kid, and they establish this like, hey, we're gonna, we're leading a revolution, and you've gotten closer to figuring this whole thing out than we have. Go find Deckard and kill him so they don't get the secret out of him or something. I don't really know why they want to have him killed. They don't really establish that. But it's then established that, oh, by the way, you're not the replicant child. You're just some dude who for some reason has this memory. And the real replicant child is this doctor woman who we very briefly see, if only to establish that, his memories are real, that he actually thought he was the kid. And
she's basically a scientist that creates memories for replicants. She's almost like a contracted hire for creating these memories, and she's isolated in a bubble for what she earlier in the film claims to be an immune disorder, a really weak immune system.
Which I'm sure her character probably actually believes. Like, she just...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she just doesn't remember.
It'd probably be hazardous to let her know as well.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, she never really knew her parents. She was immediately, given up after they were born because they knew the significance of what was happening. And so she was hidden away so that, she could kind of hide in plain sight in a sort of way for the inevitable revolution that was going to apparently happen with replicants. This part is kind of sudden, but it's very much establishing the theme of, oh, this isn't really Kay's story. It's more just he's facilitating the story of this world, which, pretty cool. But then it kind of wraps up relatively quickly from there. He goes off and he hijacks... Well, there's a very brief scene where Deckard is with Wallace and they're talking about, when Deckard knew Rachel when she was, still alive. There's a really cool scene where they have a lookalike actress playing like a remade replicant Rachel, and he's all like, and Wallace is all like, oh, if you work with me, if you tell me everything you know, where the kid is, yada yada, I will, or tell me where someone who does know where the kid is, I will give you all that you want. He's like, Deckard's all like, nah. And so they threaten to torture him. He gets shipped off, but then Ryan Gosling, or Kay, I don't know why I decided to call him by his actor that time.
Yeah, call him whatever you want.
Okay, Cheryl comes in and saves the day for, he just kind of rams into this big police escort and fights to the death with Love, the hit woman. He himself is mortally wounded, and he just kind of goes off, sends Harrison Ford to go find his daughter, and on the steps of this lab where she's hiding, he dies. Yeah. And the last shot is Harrison Ford on the other side of the glass looking at his daughter, just kind of, just looking at her, and before the scene ends. So really cool.
And we're treated with a credit sequence with names that you cannot read.
The names we could read, the titles for them we couldn't, though. It was there's a really bad problem in this movie in 2049 of having titles or subtitles that are just illegible with their style.
I watched this movie a second time on a bigger TV, and it was no better.
Oh my god! The only way you could actually read these is if it were on a massive movie screen.
Right, and even then, the font and the color, the way it's laid out, not my favorite aspect of any film.
Yeah. So that one was a bit of a pet peeve, but otherwise, really good. I loved it. I thought there were some really cool shots.
Yeah.
So each of these movies was directed by a pretty heavy hitter directors whenever you really look into it, with, obviously Ridley Scott for the original, Alien, Gladiator, a bunch of other stuff that is now escapes me somehow. And then Denis, I still have a hard time pronouncing his name.
Villeneuve?
Villeneuve. I'm just going to say, Villeneuve. He's very French.
Yes.
But he directed, I did not know this, he directed Sicario and Arrival. Two really, really good ones.
That I have not seen.
Sicario
out there.
Sicario is like this, it centers around this kind of corrupt ICE agent, I think. I haven't seen a lot of it, I've just seen bits and pieces of it. And Arrival is, basically it's like an alien, interaction movie. Really cool, visually beautiful, both of them. Sicario's freaking hardcore.
But we should say that Ridley Scott was in no means separated. He was executive producer for 2049. So
he did a lot of the setup and everything. I'm pretty sure he was one of the first people to bring up doing the new one.
Yeah.
I mean, Villeneuve wasn't even on board as director before Harrison Ford was on board to redo his character. He came up. Villeneuve actually came up after the fact. It was really impressive.
Which
kind of speaks volumes of how much people want to do this.
People like his films to get him to want to do this. Which I have to say, with this being the first of Villeneuve's films that I've seen, I mean it is quite a first film to see.
Oh yeah. But yeah, from there, it's really interesting to see how similar these two things are. I mean, obviously they're very different. They're very different styles, but it's really interesting to see this universe come back and how it's kind of been translated through new technology, new style, and that sort of thing, but still very much be the Blade Runner everybody knows.
Right.
It's pretty much it is still Los Angeles, if I remember correctly, right?
It's still in that area, because they go to San Diego.
Yeah, which is apparently a giant trash dump.
Yeah.
It doesn't even establish how long it's a trash dump, but people had lived there within the time that it had gone to hell. So it's pretty interesting.
All that being said, though, if we're sort of comparing the styles of film, or maybe what the perceived genre can be, I wish there was a bit more noir in Blade Runner 2049, because the original Blade Runner is a very sci-fi noir film. It very much embraces both of those aspects, whereas 2049 is a pretty hard sci-fi film that tries to incorporate noir elements and scenes into it.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I almost think 2049 is a bit more noir in a lot of aspects, just purely for the fact that it's so much more grounded. And when I say grounded, I mean straightforward. It's actually understandable, and there's a distinct, plot line. There's distinct motivations and everything. It feels very, cop, looking into a dark, dirty secret with larger-than-life forces attempting to keep him from doing so.
I agree with that.
Which is a very big noir thing.
Yeah, I agree with that in the base sense of what a noir is.
Yeah.
And maybe it's superficial for me thinking this way, but for the noir films that I've seen and can recall seeing, I know that's not what noir is. It's just from a specific time period.
Oh,
but
no,
I want that gritty more, that hard detective feeling, and there is detective work in there. There's the scene where he's analyzing the DNA code and stuff like that. However, I get this feeling that Blade Runner has more of this mystery to it, whereas Blade Runner 2049 has a mystery.
Yeah, that is a good point. It is very... that is a really good point. The more I think about it, yeah. Like, noir does have that very mysterious element to it that is kind of lost in the newer movie.
Right. I think that Blade Runner 2049 kind of shows its hand too early, and it turns into a twist, but
yeah,
that you don't really see coming. Maybe you can think about it as in the same scene, the DNA scene, where he's like, female, male. That's impossible.
There's 2 kids or something. It's like, no, one of them is fake, clearly. So
right.
It must be a boy. But it's like, no, it's kind of like a Chekhov's gun situation.
Yeah.
Which actually I think ties in cool to the idea of it, which actually, in my research of the movie, I kept thinking, why does Kay have this memory? And someone brought up the theory of, maybe a bunch of replicants randomly have this theory in order to propagate the idea of this child to further the idea of the revolution or something. Which I thought was kind of cool, because then it means like, even if you found out more about this, there's both a male and a female, so it could be anybody could be the child. Anyone can be this larger than life hero.
That's a good theory.
Which they establish even. It's like the revolutionary leader was like, you thought you were the kid. All of us wanted to be the kid. Trust me, believe me. And so that's kind of a cool theory that I saw floating around.
That's a good theory.
Which I think that's the biggest mystery element to it, is like, where did this memory come from? What is the point of it? But I still don't think that kind of holds a candle to the kind of style that the original had with that.
Right.
It's just everything feels mysterious. It's like, you don't understand the city, you don't understand the people in it, and you certainly don't understand the main characters.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to.
No.
There is a fine line between having an element of mystique to something and just being confusing.
Yeah. Which the original straddles very hard.
It can, just by very nature, it can be confusing. Remember, he's using that computer and he gets the mirror to warp
scene.
Around.
It just straight up just bends reality there for a few seconds.
Somehow the footage just captured more than a camera can superficially capture.
Yeah, like they kind of established in the new movie, photos can kind of be semi-interactive, but they didn't establish that in the first one, so it doesn't count.
Yeah. But that was sort of the feeling I got from it. I by no means hate if we're looking back on Scarface, there was one very clear contender that I liked more than the other, but this one I don't really know that I have a favorite, because I think they both do what they do well in different ways.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I'm kind of similar. I mean, I'm very much a film buff. I tend to lean more towards the one that I think is just better made, and that being 2049 in my opinion. But, that's kind of besides the point, I guess, at the moment. But I still think it's really interesting to just look back on them, like with that mindset of one is about a mystery, one is just mysterious, which I guess is kind of the nature of it, even throughout its history. There's 7 different versions.
That's mysterious in and of itself.
It's pretty much mythic that way. So both these movies are very distinct in their shooting style and their composition of shots. Just really off the bat, pretty much in every scene, it just establishes the location in pretty much the most grandiose manner. In the opening of the first one, it gives us this whole big wide shot of futuristic Los Angeles, fire bursting out of what are presumably some sort of fuel depots. And in The new one, it gives us a big wide open shot of these abandoned solar farms out in the, kind of middle of California area, which, cool fun fact, originally that was the original scene for the original Blade Runner as it was written, but it was used instead for the 2049 version.
That's also a real place too.
Yeah, in a real place.
I can't remember the name of the town though.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, originally Ridley Scott had written the scene of Deckard going off to hunt this one replicant out in the kind of the middle of California, but that was never used, and instead used for the new version, which I thought was really cool, and it's just an amazing opening scene. But yeah, I kept seeing just so many elements because Villeneuve is clearly a fan of the original, and so many of the shooting styles are the same. The whole classic, very grainy, gritty style is recreated with using like snow and rain over the scene to kind of give an obscuring effect versus just, camera quality back in the day, which was really cool, and also in a lot of ways actually kind of made it less crisp looking than the original one did, because I remember looking back over scenes, at least in the 2007 cut, because I'm sure it's been like remastered 3 times at this point, you can closely tell so many of the shots are just models because it's so distinct at this point. Like the giant Tyrell Corporation building looks like a Playmobil set in a lot of ways whenever I see it. It's
my
so
favorite
funny.
stuff from there, the Millennium Falcon is there. Upright. The actual Millennium Falcon is upright, and that's a building.
Really?
Yeah, in one shot in the background, you can see a kitchen sink.
Oh my god.
And that's a building.
Everything...
They just used whatever they could get their hands on.
Everything in the kitchen sink.
Yeah. He knew what he was doing.
Exactly. And then just to contrast that with the modern one, where everything, at least in the opening, in some of the bigger early establishing shots, is super, actually dark. Like, even the Tyrell building, which is now the Wallace building, is cloaked entirely in darkness in the new one. It doesn't have any of the kind of gold lighting until you get inside it. Which
is cool, because that's sort of a recreation of it. Because if you remember the Tyrell building in the first one, it's so dark. I remember commenting on that, why is it so dark? All they have is natural window lighting. Yeah. But then you get into his quarters, and there's lights everywhere.
It's just
creating
everywhere.
A yellow glow.
Yeah.
And in the building, as you get closer and closer to Wallace's headquarters, yellow glow everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's the same exact thing, just stark yellow walls of light with rippling patterns near water and fading effects near windows.
And just, seemingly out of nowhere moving lights that are kind of simulating a moving sun or anything, but it's clearly in the middle of the night or completely pitch black raining. So it's like, where is any of this light coming from? And so it just blatantly establishes everything's just weird here. It's beautiful, but it's weird. And I really liked what they did with the interior of Wallace's headquarters, because A, it looked cool, but B, it did actually have a practical purpose with Wallace's character being blind and so much presence of water and big open echoey spaces. I actually even remember Villeneuve designed the specific room that Wallace hangs out in is designed after some style of Japanese temple that's meant to actually reverberate sound off of the floor in order to detect intruders.
Which I've heard about that basic principle of water.
Yeah.
Being used to reflect sound before.
Yeah. And so just all of it is to establish, just a sensory overload for this guy who normally can't see. And who, establishes he can sort of look at his replicants with these floating sonar bots kind of thing, which is pretty cool. Just a cool little shot to see. But it's just an assault on the senses in every way whenever you think about it like that.
All senses but sight to him.
Exactly, and to us it's pretty much all sight. So it's a cool parallel between, the original Wallace headquarters and this one. And that's pretty much reflected throughout most of the film.
The only thing is that if you're looking at setting, 2049 does a way better job with setting in capturing the landscape and how things are. Now,
big time.
Yeah, if I'm being fair, because when I'm talking about setting, I mean, Blade Runner's in the same city. It's a very cool looking city, but it's in there the whole time.
Yes.
But that's also part of the story. He's hunting them down within the city. He doesn't have a lot of options to go other places.
Exactly.
2049 explores the entirety of California with a lot of different locales. That's the solar farms with the stand house.
It goes as far as
Wallace's interior in the city, which looks different from the exterior city, of course.
And then it goes as far out as, giant dust cloud covered Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Which is...
I love
such a cool shot. Just entering Vegas and everything.
Can I be a hypocrite for a second?
Go right ahead. I welcome it.
It
makes you dynamic.
I love the post-apocalyptic feel of Las Vegas with the dunes in the background and just the yellow haze over everything.
Uh-huh.
I love that post-apocalyptic aspect. On the other end, I really don't care for the setting of the child farm. Because that's too stereotypically post-apocalyptic for my taste. It's like, I've seen this in a million other films. I feel like this could have been so much more innovative than just a big junkyard.
Also, I just like to establish, Jacob, that place is called an orphanage, not a child farm.
It's a child farm. They're making them work on robot parts.
That's like the most old school way of putting it. I've got a new child down from the child farm today. He'll help out with my day-to-day duties.
That place is a child farm.
It is. I won't give you that much crap. It really was. It's just
like
this...
when your parents send you away to camp and you end up making wallets and shit on macrame and they end up selling it.
I mean, this is a bit more darker than that, but yeah, same principle.
Yeah.
Child farm. It's funny to think about. But yeah, I do love Vegas, and then the kind of like San Diego is established to be this giant like literal trash heap, like because it got destroyed through some fault of someone else. I don't know, and then they just use it as a trash dump, and it really is pretty dull in comparison to this pleasure palace that he finds in Las Vegas with like giant statues of scantily clad women doing like faces and stuff. it's really pretty cool, and just it's all
the Ozymandias
aspect to it, yeah. And then like him going into the casino and having all the bright lights and the holograms of Elvis and Frank Sinatra and Liberace at that one point.
It's so self-indulgent.
It's so cool. I love it, and it's just so distinct from. It's probably one of the most distinct scenes in the film, easily. But obviously, with all these similarities and everything, there will inevitably be the differences. As this is definitely not, it is very much a sequel, and a very long overdue sequel, as we've established. There's going to be a lot of changes to the whole formula. Like, my biggest thing I noticed was Villeneuve's tendency to go towards a lighter color palette than Ridley Scott did. There's a whole lot of scenes where it's just explicitly white all around the main characters. A lot of scenes of like clarity, like anytime it's establishing, what's kind of going on, like, oh, this is, some revelation that we're finding out about these characters, or that we're just seeing in general about this world.
Right. And if I can go back to the color palette in the film, in the essence of noir for a second,
yeah,
I think if I'm playing devil's advocate to myself in my earlier statements, I do think that has some to do with my thoughts on the whole matter. Because just by the very nature of a lot of noir films, like the big noir boom in film came out in a period of black and white when shadows were just natural because of black and whiteness. So you get that feeling that with a darker color palette, it is noir. And with a whiter palette, you think of like 2001: A Space Odyssey is the perfect example of that. White institutes in the mind like sleek sci-fi, and I think that maybe I think some of my points stand, but I think that might be where a lot of my thoughts come from.
Yeah, I do see where you're coming from. The new one does very much establish, this is very hard sci-fi. Like, we're really expressing that we can use, modern film technology to say, oh, this is a really cool shot and not just clearly a model that we have good lighting on.
Right.
And so from that, they can kind of get away with doing more and more things, and there's just this very common trend these days that hard sci-fi tends to be very sleek.
Right.
Whereas, old school is very kind of gritty and, kind of less established. Mm-hmm. Whereas now it's like, all the stuff we saw in this is stuff that could conventionally happen. Whereas in the original, not so much. It was like, the technology was left very, very vague.
Right.
It's meant to just kind of be like, this is your story. This is the world you're in. Deal with it. Whereas the new one's like, ooh, this could be the world. Which is...
Maybe in the future.
Look at this. It's Blade Runner of the future.
Blade Runner of the future.
Exactly. It's like the city of tomorrow.
Today. No, but when they have to do like straight up noir, you can see the effort put into it because, like I said, for a lot of those older films, shadows come naturally to the aspect that it's black and white. They still have to cast a lot of black to make the black.
Oh yeah,
of course. So it's not like they weren't trying to do a particular style in those films, but it was easier in a film like this that's in color.
Yeah,
they have to play with shadows a lot more delicately to get that feeling, and as in when Ryan Gosling is attempting to grill Batista with the eye scan.
Oh yeah.
They play with shadows a lot there to try and get that feeling.
Oh, yeah, that opening scene is very immediately establishing of like, or at least trying to immediately establish a lot of stuff with noir. Where it's just like, oh, it's just dark, it's gritty, they're beating the shit out of each other.
Don't get up.
It's pretty cool. But then, from that whole idea of it, I kind of, like, now I just kind of think about that even kind of comes into the themes of the story. Like, the original one, like, this is kind of a thing I've seen in a lot of noir. There's always kind of themes of, at least when, like, or at least of detective shows in general, it's like, there's big themes of inequality in a real society. Like, you know, in this case, we're talking about replicants and how they're considered, like, subhuman and literally can't even live nearly as long as a human, and they're trying to establish themselves as equals. Whereas in the new one, it's more very hard sci-fi of, this is a new, straight up new species that's trying to establish itself. And so that is another thing I was thinking about. It's like, you know, it might not have been as big a thing in the classic noirs. Like, it probably tried to avoid sensitive subjects of, like, inequality, but it was always it does seem like kind of an element in detective shows, at least nowadays, which I'm noticing, which I think was kind of cool in the original. It was trying to establish these guys are being hunted simply because of what they are, versus in the new one, these guys are controlled. Now they're trying to secretly make themselves uncontrolled.
Yeah. One is sort of the right to life, and the other is sort of like the right to a better life. Yeah,
basically. And I think the new one just really does go hard sci-fi on that one for sure.
Yeah.
It's like straight up, oh, this was a robot, now it's a robot that can self-replicate. Whereas the original one, it's like, oh, this is a sort of robot. This is the closest thing. This is basically what a society would establish as a robot, but as a modern society, we have no idea how to understand it.
Right.
Whereas in the new one, it's like, oh, yeah, they're just robots, they can self-replicate, that's it. Which is kind of become a common trope more and more. I'm seeing that a lot with sci-fi nowadays, the idea of a robot society that it's able to recreate itself, and it being either a bad thing or an amazing thing. In this movie, it asks the question of both. It's both good and bad, depending on how you look at it. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it just kind of came to mind. It was like, it's not necessarily drawing back on noir film, but it was very distinct of each of one. That's probably the overarching theme of the whole thing just completely shifted like that. Of going from, you know, like how you put it, right to life versus right to a better life. Which I think is the best way to describe the two of them.
Alright. After like a breath or so, do you want to go into the elements of the whiteness for clarity? Sure. Because I can use that as a jumping off point to talking a bit about the point of having Kay in the story. Like, why is this from the point of view of Kay in particular? So, and then also, I have some thoughts on that.
Sure. I'm going to try to bring up the idea of the baseline test, because that whole thing, like, when he's in that white room doing that, I'll try to bring that up and maybe throw in some fun facts about it. Like, you know, the thing he's like, I'll bring up, he has to recite
the book,
this one poem, and then repeat lines without having emotional reactions.
Right.
Which, in the first scene you see it in, he doesn't have any, but in the new one, it's like, oh, he actually is starting to be emotional. So it's like, moment of clarity. In the first one, it tries to establish, oh, this is a sterile environment, you're not allowed to have clarity. Whereas in the second one, he actually, you know, defies that. At least on accident.
Yeah.
Okay. I briefly brought it up earlier, the idea of, you know, Villeneuve bringing up big scenes of revelation and clarity in it's his color palette around the characters, most certainly using the color white, which was very sparingly used in the original one. Anything time there was anything white, it was overcast by like darkness. Even in the original first scene where he's at the noodle stand, most of it is kind of light colored, but it's still so dark and rainy out that it comes across as more blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the new one, there's just so many scenes of stark whiteness. There's whenever Kay returns to his mostly gray apartment and is talking with his holographic girlfriend, being like, oh, this is bad stuff that's going down, or this is when I'm first starting to think maybe I'm this mythical child. Or in the very ending scene, which is really the most significant moment of it, in which Kay dies in order to reunite Deckard with his daughter. And it's just kind of draws back on the earlier line by this resistance woman of, it's better to, we die, it's better to, die for a cause that we believe in than to live as, prisoners, more or less. That's not the exact line, but it's close.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take the time to go back, and I'm sure there's some IMDb quote for it somewhere, but I don't want to care at the moment. That part of the story was kind of my biggest pet peeve, because it just kind of felt a little shoehorned in. It was cool to establish the idea of, Kay is meant to be a medium for this world to be shown to us, but at the same time, it's like, that's a bit much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, establish a bigger presence of that earlier on in the film rather than vague hints towards it.
Mm-hmm.
But I get beside myself.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of a cool timepiece too, because in the background, the story is about the independence of these androids, the replicants, for their own life. But if we're thinking about it from a storytelling perspective, what's the purpose of having this particular replicant in the foreground as opposed to any other? And a lot of that, I think, stems from he has his own. He goes through the motions of this. We get to witness the background play through him.
Oh, yeah.
As well, because he starts out solely following orders, and he doesn't have much purpose in life other than to do the tasks that he's given.
Right. And it even kind of establishes that at the end. Like, there's a brief period where, whenever Kay is having his identity crisis, that his girlfriend Joy brings up, oh, you need a real name, how's about Joe? And then he kind of vaguely goes by Joe throughout the rest of the movie. But then after the fact, after his girlfriend is killed, destroyed, whatever, he encounters this big advertisement of the program computer girlfriend that he had bought, and it straight up goes up to him and is like, wow, you're like, it calls him like a real Joe, and it's trying to be like, oh, this sexy robot girlfriend could be yours, she'll call you Joe and rub your feet and that sort of crap. And it's just trying to be like, oh, he's just literally a common dude, like the idea of this literally could have been anyone, and that's the point,
right? Which
I kind of like. It's just kind of a pretty big jump from the story that we were used to, and the fact that Deckard ends up becoming the main focus again, which is fine, but still.
I like it to its own extent, because it follows that transformation of that's sort of a really down moment for him. He holds up he holds up that gun. And it's sort of a contemplation type moment, because what purpose does he have? He had this faint moment of, oh, destiny's been thrust upon me. I do have a purpose, because he thinks he's this special replicant that can
he thinks himself to be the chosen one. Like, it's turning the chosen one trope kind of on its head here.
But essentially, and what he finds out in the end is he has to make his own. He can't be given it. He can't be given a special purpose by others. He has to find his own way and make his own purpose in life, which is what the rebellion is attempting to do for themselves.
Yeah.
They're trying to make their own way and make their own life that they feel they deserve.
And this is just the more and more I think about it, the more I think, like, wow, this was based off Blade Runner? This doesn't sound like Blade Runner at all. It's such a big jump there at the end that I think is the biggest freaking difference of the films.
And now, if we're looking at Blade Runner, the 1982 Blade Runner,
Yeah.
Deckard's relation to the story sort of mirrors that of Kay's.
A little bit, yeah.
It's from a different experience, obviously, but the background story is different in and of itself.
Right. Like Kay kind of has a very direct involvement with this whole background story, but Deckard kind of seems to have a bit more of a hostile. Like, he literally is hunting down these people trying to live for themselves.
Right. It's exploring that belief system that the androids or replicants seem to have, that they should be able to live. They have a right to live because they're sentient creatures, and Deckard is there to witness this. As he goes on, he gets less and less actual hatred for these things. He starts to realize, especially with Rachel, these things do deserve a right to live. These creatures are sentient beings that can feel and experience life.
And I think like he really does first get that right after he kills Zora, which is is the first one he ends up killing. Now that I remember it. But after that, even when he's facing off against Leon, one of the other replicants, right after the fact, he kind of humors him a little bit, like asking him questions, he's responding to questions and that sort of thing. And it's not even he himself that ends up doing the killing blow; it's Rachel, who saves him out of nowhere.
Right. He you can see that hesitation, and they do a really good job at drawing that, because it's like, oh, we do this all the time. I get paid commission based on killing replicants. That is my job.
Yeah.
I give them the test and I kill them. But when he kills Zora, it goes slow motion. It's like that shutter sort of frame where it captures like her falling, and that's supposed to be the moment of his sort of breaking, because these are Nexus 6s. They're a different breed. They are just practically human.
Right. And like they're a little emotionally stunted, but not nearly as much as presumably they used to be.
Right.
And then it immediately kind of doubles down that the very next scene after he kills her and like talks to his his boss, he gets a bottle of whiskey. He goes up like straight, is like, I need to get drunk. I can't deal with this right now.
This is bad.
So that is a really cool kind of difference, but also similarity that like both Kay and Deckard had, relating to him.
And it leads in well to Kay's experience, because if Kay were a human, it would, regardless of the replicant's motives in 2049, if Ryan Gosling was playing a human character from the beginning, you could just say it was a rehashed story because he's still doing that job.
Right.
But changing him to a replicant, it seems like natural progression. Like, where do we take this? Well, he is a replicant, and by the very admission of multiple characters and the laws of the world, replicants aren't necessarily supposed to care for one another. They're supposed to do their jobs.
Right, exactly.
So I think they bleed pretty, maybe not in theming, but pretty seamlessly they bleed together in the way that they handle the plot.
Right.
So all that deep analysis aside, what are like your actual thoughts on the movie? What's some scenes, some shots you like? What'd you care for? What'd you not care for?
I mean, maybe it's just because we had watched 2049 most recently, but I remember more shots from it than I remember from the original. Mostly because they're just so in your face, just good, cool shots. I mean, everything in the Wallace building, the just overarching shots of the city when it's like raining and snowing, one of the last shots when Ryan Gosling's character is like dying on the steps, they're just really just technically stunning. For the original, a lot of it's pretty cool, like the opening shot over it, or like the Tyrell like conference room with the owl flying around. That's hard to deny. That one's pretty cool.
It is cool,
but it's just more. I remember more of 2049, even story wise, which it's to be expected. It's much more coherent, which I think. I like. Whenever we're watching movies, I try to think of like what's a good wow moment. I didn't have one in particular. For the original, but the scene in 2049 where the holographic girlfriend is like standing over the real like prostitute girl in order to like during the whole like implied sex scene thing, that was crazy, because like I don't even know how the hell they did it.
It was just a technical, like,
Yeah.
look at this thing.
Yeah, and
that's
I know,
clearly what it was.
Oh yeah, I know it was completely just to be like, oh, look at this impressive shit we can do, but like it worked.
Yeah.
I fell for it and it was awesome.
And to sort of like go off that, we did watch 2049 more recently, and it's more coherent.
Oh yeah,
that's what you get when there's only one cut of a film.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully it's more coherent.
And they, distinctly go into it with the thought of, let's not make this crazy.
Right.
Let's make this, distinctly coherent so we don't have to have 7 goddamn cuts.
Right. But also for Blade Runner, and obviously they do it deliberately. It's due to choice and style, but
oh yeah.
A lot of the shots are just really dark or hazy, so it's hard to see them. And again, that's the style, but it does make it hard to pick them out and not let all the scenes blend together.
And like, I'm kind of curious to think, was this before Alien for Ridley Scott, or was this
Alien came out in 79. Blade Runner was 82.
Okay, that's actually kind of surprising, because it almost feels like Blade Runner is kind of like an early work for Ridley Scott, because a lot of his later work is actually visually incredible. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of Alien Covenant, but holy crap, the visuals were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking back on this one, it's like I see elements of that, but not with any of the polish.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's dark, there's cool sweeping shots, but they don't really like bring they don't kind of come together like you'd want them to.
Yeah.
Like, and that also might just be with the quality of restoring film, like I mentioned earlier with the like whenever you see a model of a giant building and it very much looks like it's a model now. Back in the day, it probably looked a lot better.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You can kind of see the wires, so to speak, nowadays.
Right. Funny thing for that, just as a slight tangent, is apparently in Blade Runner, a lot of the computer screen overlays, or the things that appear on the computer screens while they're flying around in the car, are just ripped straight from what computer screens had on them in Alien. They just took the same things and just plastered it on the computers. Not? Yeah, because they already had it.
Exactly. I mean, it kind of reminds me of during like the infamous like first cut of the movie where Deckard and Rachel like escape into the mountains or something. I don't even remember. It's been years since I've seen that cut. Yeah. But it's apparently actually made up of, like it has shots of them going into the mountains, like driving in. It's made up of extra B-roll footage that was shot from The Shining, from like Kubrick's The Shining. I saw that. I was like, that's somehow great. Is incredible and also not surprising.
What's wrong with reusing footage?
I mean, nothing. I just thought it was so cool, especially back then. Like nowadays, you couldn't get away with that shit. Like nowadays, someone would be like, that's the exact shot from blah, 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 extra features, blah. And like back then, it's like, we didn't release anything yet, so you don't know. Everything's on hard copy.
It's sort of getting us slightly back on track.
No, not just me with my technical, like, just like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Well, there were a lot of things in 2049 I liked, but like taking Kubrick into account, since we just mentioned him, the shot where Ryan Gosling first enters the Wallace Corporation and he's talking to the file clerk.
Oh, yeah.
And I even said it at the time while we were watching it, but it's just like a stark yellow scene and they're conversing with each other even though you can only see the hands of the file clerk.
Oh, yeah.
And then it cuts to the inside and it's still his hands just going through stuff. That is such a... I was like, this looks like it's just a saturated scene from 2001 with like a really yellow background instead of a white background. That's exactly the feel I got from it.
Which is this Victor Zsasz looking motherfucker on the computer. It was. I mean, I said it before. Just everything in that building was just so beautifully shot, and that was just one various scene. The whole thing. There's a scene with like the half-made replicants in the storage tanks. There's a scene where the one replicant lady gets like born. It's just the whole thing is just an assault on the senses in a good way.
Yeah, and anything with the rippling effects or the light effects, like through shades or windows in that building, how it just moves and flows across the walls.
Oh yeah, it's the whole thing is just so stunning. From the beginning all the way to the end. With the movie, especially like the shots over the abandoned solar farms in the beginning. That one scene where he's walking away from the house, and then you cut to a direct shot behind him, and all of a sudden the entire house is just on fire.
Yeah.
It was just so jarring. It was like, whoa.
That's when he goes back, right?
Yeah.
It's the baby booty.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. That was crazy.
Oh, that was great.
And it's just, yeah. I mean, I guess that kind of shows my hand of which of the two movies I like better.
No, if I'm being perfectly honest, I prefer 2049 too.
Yeah, I
prefer it to the first one.
And like I do, and I don't want to come across as me disliking the original. Like the original is great. I mean, it's interesting. It's got this whole almost mythic appeal with how strange it's been throughout its production and post-production just over the years. How basically what's now considered to be the most real cut of the film only came out in 2007 when it came out in 1982 originally.
The final cut.
Exactly. It's just that's just so weird to think that the whole thing basically had a legacy that long, and then probably right after that they were like, all right, let's make a new one. It's like, okay. It's just, for what it is, Blade Runner's cool, but as just a quality movie, for 2049's just leaps and bounds better.
Right. And it's more coherent.
Exactly. Like
just period as a film, and
it's like what's going on, there's not nearly as many plot holes throughout it, like, aforementioned inconsistent lifespan with Rutger Hauer's character in the original. It's just, whereas in this one it's just like, okay, they don't have a time limit, they just kind of do their thing, and also they can give birth now, and that's kind of the whole crux of the deal. Go.
How does that work? It doesn't matter.
Who cares? You don't understand. You didn't understand how these things work before. You know even less now. That's all you need.
If Joe Turkel was still alive in this one, then we would just get his opinion.
Exactly.
Ask him how he did it.
God rest you, you beautiful bastard.
I mean, I have to assume that, right? Didn't they say he died in the opening crawl, or was it just he was ostracized from the business, or what? I know there was an uprising, but I don't know. I don't remember how that affected the Tyrell Corporation.
Well, what, didn't Rutger Hauer kill him?
You're right, he did.
Yeah,
I forgot that scene.
That's a pretty big point. How long has it been, man? Have you been talking about a completely different movie this whole time?
No. It's only been a couple of weeks, but even by your own admission, that thing's fucking confusing.
But that's a pretty significant scene. It's a pretty significant scene. I thought we were talking about Spaceballs. Or that one bartender in The Shining.
Space Jam? Lloyd? I like Lloyd. By the way, if you want confusing, that book is like 130 pages or so. It's not that long, but
and this being Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yes, yeah. Blade Runner.
For a second, I thought you were saying The Shining.
No.
We'll
talk about that later.
Cool.
It is so confusing. The movie thankfully drops all elements of the religion that's in the book.
Yeah, you did bring up like there was some other shit about like how humans don't have emotions at all anymore.
That's the only part of the book that I really found was cool. Is they have like an empathy box with dials from 0 to 999, and each one's a different, really specific emotion, and people dial it in and go into the box and connect with their deity known as Mercer, and they get that emotion. I'm
so surprised that there's no mention of that at all in either film. At least not that I can tell. If there is, it's just some background crap.
Right.
But maybe I'll take that book out. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'm kind of done with Blade Runner for a little bit. I just having to watch the original 3 times to get a couple points, and then by comparison watching the new one being like, oh my god, a good film. Again, I give that one too much. The original too much crap. It's great, but
now to go off and watch the other 2 films we'll be analyzing 5 times a week.
Oh my god!
So,
I mean, hopefully it won't be as dry.
Yeah.
But you'll just have to wait and see.
Whoa! All right.
But yeah,
that's it. You got any plugs?
No.
Me neither.
We still haven't made a Twitter or anything, so there's nothing to...
I'm actually planning on making a Twitter before the next one.
Alright, cool.
So by the time this goes up and the next one goes up, there will be a Twitter.
So that'll be nice. Look for the name of that in probably the next cast.
Yeah.
Or, it'll probably be something to the degree of, they remade it, Twitter. The podcast Twitter, whatever.
They remade it 979 because there's so many before it.
or I Love Green Day '87.
Yeah.
we couldn't get the rights to. Apparently, they remade it. Was a weird indie band back in the '90s.
XX_ Blink 182 _ XX.
But yeah,
good night.
That aside, I think we're good. So, yeah, have a good night. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
You're not even close to baseline.